Hi, everybody, and hi, everybody online. Um, I don't mind being interrupted at any time. If you have a question, don't let it fester, just come out with it. And I'll try and monitor the online chat box as much as I can. Anyway, today we're here to talk about business case. Okay, thank you. Okay, so the idea of this lecture is how to construct your business case, how to determine if your business is viable and can attract investment. Okay, so the agenda is we'll go over what is a business case, why do you need one, what are the most important elements in the business case, validation, and how strong does your business case really have to be before you go seeking investment. And then we'll have a break, and then there will be a workshop, which I will talk to you about when we get there. Okay, so what is a business case? A business case is a core document. It's basically your pitch. It's not a business plan, but it forms the basis of your business plan. Business plans are all having to do with details, very boring. But the business case is really, what is this business all about? How are you going to make it successful? It's a 30,000-foot view. Okay, why do you need it? This is really, really important. The most important reason to have a business plan is for yourself. Everybody gets a great idea and they rush out to form a business. And most people do not do a thorough business case. And as a result, what happens is you spend years of your life and financial resources only to find out 3, 4, 5 years later that there was something missing from your business case that turns around and kills you. If you're going to do this, you want to be really, really certain that it's going to work. And it takes a great deal of work to do a business case. There's no denying that. It's a lot of effort. But in the end, you have to convince yourself that this is worth devoting your life to, because it will get very intense. You'll be working 18-hour days, you'll be traveling a lot, you'll be under a lot of stress, and it's got to be worth it. So do the business case, put in the work, put in the effort, and the rewarding part is that you'll have a business that is much more likely to be successful. Okay, why else do you need a business case? The obvious answer to this is for investors. Okay, when you go out to raise money, you are swimming with the sharks, and you do not want to get eaten alive. Investors these days are very, very sophisticated. It used to be in this country that there were no investors that specialized in medical devices, and when you went to them with a medical device, they were kind of out of their depth and didn't know a lot more than you did about it. But that's all changed now. There are specialized medical device investors. They are very sharp. They will look at your business case and they will identify any weaknesses that there are. If you have a strong business case, first of all, it dramatically improves the possibility that you're going to get investment. But even more importantly, it improves your valuation. So if the investor sees that you really know what you're talking about, that you've done a good job building your business case, you're going to get a higher pre-money value. And that means you're giving away less of your company. Okay, I hope that makes sense to everybody. Okay, now, there's a lot of elements to your business case, but I've narrowed it down to these four really important aspects, and I'm going to talk about each one of them. You have to understand your market, understand your value proposition, and be able to relate that in your business case. You have to address financial return for a potential investor or for yourself. You have to address the ability to execute. Can you actually pull this off? And finally, you have to address risk. Risk is a really important factor in a business case. And it's very, very seldom do people talk about risk. But when I am commissioned to do a due diligence, that's where I concentrate actually the most. Okay. The other thing that you're never told about when people talk about business plans is validation. Validation is the most important part of your business case. It's the most important part. Anybody can pick numbers out of the air. Okay, it's really easy to do. You can write a business case in a few hours, you pick all the numbers out of the air, and you go out, but it means nothing. It has to be validated. This is absolutely critical, and I'm going to be spending the majority of time today talking about how you validate your business case. Okay, so first thing is, so validate every number, every assumption, and as I said, the stronger the validation, the stronger your business case, pure and simple. And again, to remind you, you're not just convincing investors of this, you're convincing yourself of this. Okay, it's really, really important. Okay, so we're going to talk about what goes into a business case first, and then I'm going to talk about validation of those things. You've probably all seen this before. You have to understand your market. The total addressable market basically tells you what you can eventually expand into. If your total addressable market is small, it's probably not worth doing. Okay, it has to be big enough. You may not be able to address that market with your first product, but if you're going into something which is kind of an orphan disease, and there's only going to be one product and you have no pipeline, and your total addressable market is small, it's really tough. Yes?
What if the market is small, but it's a niche market for you, where you realize that there's no other competitor, there's very little product the market? Would you still advise the person to be targeting that market or go for something bigger?
So I'm going to be talking about this later, but a lot really depends on, you know, some businesses work well as kind of a single, and some businesses are home runs. You know what I mean by the difference? You're talking about a single. If you can address a market really quickly, if you can get something on the market in a couple of years and get a nice return and do some good for society, that works. But if you have a excuse me, if you have a class product, by which I mean there's huge regulatory burden, it's going to take you 10 years to get to the market, and it's a niche market, it's probably not. Okay, there's too much risk that something else is going to happen in the market in the meantime, and professional investors are not going to support. Professional investors will support something that is, sorry, what is that? Someone is not muted and is affecting audio. Okay. So if professional investors are going to look at what's my return on investment, if it's a small investment and you can get a return quickly, it may be worth doing. Does that answer your question? Okay, moving on. Okay, now it's not advancing. I mean, perfect, thank you. Okay, so the other thing that has to be in your business case is your market potential and your value proposition. You've probably all heard about value proposition before. Does it solve a real problem? Why is it compelling? And more importantly, do you have a value proposition for all of the different stakeholders that you're going to be addressing? Obviously, you need a value proposition for the physicians or nurses or technicians who are going to use your product. But you also need a value proposition for the hospital in total, especially with private healthcare in the United States. And that value proposition is going to be, does it make the money? You need a value proposition for regulatory. You need a value proposition for the healthcare system in total. Does the healthcare system in total save money? The value proposition is arguably the most important part of your business case. And we're going to talk about validation of that value proposition. Is this a truly disruptive new product? Is this going to change the standard of care? Or is this a minor improvement over something that is out there? Okay, you need to be honest with yourself. But if it's truly disruptive, you need to address that in your business case. Is the market receptive? What that means is, will doctors consider using it? If your product changes the workflow for the physician, you're going to run into a lot of pushback because people don't like change. Can it be reimbursed adequately? We don't think about this much in Canada, but the United States, if the doctors aren't reimbursed for using it, they're not going to use it. This thing could cure cancer, but if doctors aren't reimbursed for using it, they won't use it. I know that sounds very dramatic, and I didn't believe it either when I was first told about it, but I have experienced it. What is the payback period for the customer? In other words, if I spend $100,000 to buy this thing, how long until I make that money back? Okay, there were two questions. Go ahead.
I have a question about that statement about doctors will use it if they there's no compensation. I wonder, like, what's your thought on the ecosystem being more of the impetus for them to use it? Like, I'm thinking insurance companies or hospitals.
So basically, oh, sure, sorry. So the question was, will the ecosystem support the doctor using it even if there's no direct reimbursement? In the United States, there's something called DRGs, which means that the doctors do not get paid directly they get paid for a diagnosis as opposed to any individual tasks that they have to do. So in that case, if the hospital gets reimbursed, if the DRG is high enough that it can support the use of your product, then the ecosystem will support it. But if you have a DRG that is not conducive to adding some value, then they won't. And most of the things in the United States, there's a lot that's done on an outpatient basis, a lot more than here. And doctors get paid directly per procedure for those. Yes, ma'am.
Particularly within the Canadian.
So the Canadian ecosystem reimbursement is extremely challenging. OHIP in particular moves at a glacial pace. So getting something reimbursed in Canada takes years and years and years. Generally, for most companies that start up in Canada, Canada is not the main market. Most companies, it's the United States that's the main market. And there are 1 million reimbursement consultants in the United States that will be happy to take your money and try and guide you through the process. Reimbursement in the States takes a long time too, typically at least a couple of years. And that's a couple of years after you have your clinical trial evidence to support the reimbursement. But as I said, there are a lot of consultants, they can get you through the whole process. And, you know, in general, with a med tech business, people will start off in the market before there's reimbursement because the key opinion leaders will want to use it. Some of the early adopters will want to use it, but you will not get general adoption without reimbursement. Okay. So you have to, in your business case, you have to put your market potential, your value proposition. And as I was saying before, is this a home run or a single? Okay. How you approach the rest of your business case really depends on whether this is what they call an albatross, something that's going to be huge, or whether this is just going to be a nice business. And I have to tell you, I've been involved in a few singles that have paid off very well. It certainly can happen. You get a niche product, as you say, and you know, it can get adopted very quickly, especially if it's not too expensive. What the investors are really looking for are home runs. If you go to a venture capital company, they want a home run in general. So if it's a single and you can get angel funding or friends and family funding and get it done, great. It's certainly worth doing, and it's not going to take 20 years of your life. But if this is going to be a home run, it's going to take you a lot of time, a lot of effort, many, many years. Make sure you understand the difference. Okay, let's move on to financial return. You obviously have to put in your business case how much financing you need. Okay? Financing is usually tranched, which means you're going to get some financing now and you're going to get more later after you have made some milestones. This is both to the investor's benefit because there's less risk, but also to your benefit because you have to give away less of your company. Okay, you start off, you want to raise in your seed round maybe $1 million, and you have a pre-seed valuation of maybe $3 million. You're giving away a quarter of your company. But if you had to raise $10 million and your pre-seed valuation was only $3 million, you'd be giving away most of your company. So you raise in tranches. You need to find out how much you need now and how long it will take you to get to market, how much money you will need in the subsequent phases. Okay, is this a device that can get to market with a total of $10 million, or is this something that's going to need a total of $100 million? How long will it take before the device gets to market, and how long will it take for your sales to ramp up enough so that you break even? These are all things investors want you to estimate. Another critical thing is there sufficient gross margin? In order to know what the gross margin is, you have to know two things. First of all, what is it going to cost you to produce this thing? And secondly, what will the market pay for it? These are both difficult to find out, but it is critical in your business case that you find them out. Typically, for a medical technology business, you need to have a 70% gross margin for a company to be viable. Okay, are there real comparisons for an exit? Most medical technology companies are managed to be acquired. Okay, very often the founder does not want them ever to be acquired, but you go out for venture capital financing and the venture capitalist says, we'll invest if you can be acquired in 5 years. Otherwise, we won't invest, because that's how venture capitalists make their money. Okay, and they have to have that return on investment. Venture capitalists are, most of them are not interested in seeing you run this business for 30 years and give it to your children and have it carried on. So are there real comparables for an exit? Were there companies in this field that got acquired fairly recently? And what was the multiple that they got acquired for? Yeah.
Question. So when we hear about things like funding rounds, where
Yeah.
the company gets several funding rounds, I'm
Mhm.
wondering, are some of those rounds, are they buying out previous investment?
No.
The new investment? Okay. So
No, in fact, it's the opposite. Generally, if you go for your next funding round, the new investor is going to expect the existing investors to participate in the new funding round.
is that an exchange for shares? I'm just wondering, like, how do you convince people to invest if they've already invested in your company?
Oh, because you've hit a milestone. So for example, you get your seed financing, and with that seed financing, you develop a prototype and you do a clinical trial, and the clinical trial results are good. You go out, you get your next round. If you don't hit your milestone, it's really tough to get your next round. And that's why it's so critical to have a business case that you have validated so that you can say, I'm raising $1 million and I will hit this milestone. Okay, because if you don't, what happens is you go back to your existing investors and you say, I didn't hit the milestone, but I now need more money because I've run out. And one of two things will happen. They will either say, no more money, or they will say, okay, we'll give you more money, but your pre-seed valuation now, which was 3 million, is now 1 million. So you're giving away much more of your company. And it's not that they're punishing you, it's that it reflects reality. You had a question.
I was wondering if you could explain again how investors benefit from you getting acquired.
Okay, so the question is, how do investors benefit from you getting acquired? Venture capital investors are looking for a return of at least 3x, meaning they want to, if they invest $1 million, they want $3 million back. That would be a minimum. They're really looking for 10x. So typically what will happen is you'll do a seed investment round that will be, $1 or $2 million. That'll be followed a year and a half later with what's called a Series A round. And let's say the Series A round is $10 million. And you use that money to get on the market, start selling, and then Medtronic or Boston Scientific comes along and says, wow, we really like that product. We're going to buy your company and we're going to pay you $50 million. So by this time, the venture capitalist probably owns 50% of the company. So they get half of that $50 million, $25 million against their $10 million investment. So they've made 2.5 times their money, and they wouldn't be very happy with that, but they take it. Anybody else? Okay. How do investors look at licensing as a money-making strategy? So a licensing business model can make money just like any other business model if it is right. If it is, for example, many years ago, there was a company in Mississauga called Sidara Software. I did a lot of consulting to Sidara Software, one of my first customers. That was a licensing model. They developed software. They specialized in surgical navigation systems. And So they developed software for Philips and Siemens and they were fairly early in PAC systems. And it was all licensed. They had developed this core software and they were licensing the core software to other companies. And they made a lot of money and they got acquired. So there are times that licensing works very well. Okay. There are times it doesn't. Basically, licensing works really well if you have developed a technology that everybody wants. Okay. And especially if one of the competitors already has it and the other competitors don't have it. Well, they're going to want it and they don't want to develop it themselves because it takes too long. So if you already have it developed, they're going to license it from you. Okay. So every business model has its place in this field. Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So we talked about financial returns. As I said, what you want in your business case is what internal rate of return you are projecting for your investors. If you don't know about IRR and you don't know how to calculate, this is the time to learn it. Because the language of investors is money. Okay, and if they ask you what the IRR is and you don't know the answer, they're gone. Okay, they are entrusting you with a lot of money and they want to know that you speak their language. Okay, next, ability to execute. Can you actually get this done? What investors are looking for is experience. So you have two different companies present to investors. One has a CEO who's right out of school or right out of a hospital, has never run a business before, has a great idea. The other business has a good idea, but the CEO has run 3 different businesses and had all exits over $100 million. Who would you invest in? Okay, they are looking for experience. And you see all these things down here on this slide. They're looking for experience in every single one of them. Business, finance, research, technical, product development, quality, regulatory, clinical trials, marketing. What do you do if you're the CEO who's right out of school and it's your first business? How do you manage this objection? Anybody have any ideas? So the investor's looking at you saying, you've never done this before. Why should I invest in you? How do I know you're any good? The answer to the question is, if you don't have experience, you need to surround yourself with people who do. Pure and simple. You need to be able to say, I have all these advisors who've done it before. I have recruited all of these people who have done it before. They're ready to join the company as soon as I get financing. That's what mentoring is all about as well. If you can get mentored at one of the local incubators, U of T, I believe, has 11 right now, or 12. In the medical device field, there's H2I, the Health Technology Exchange, and there's CDL, the Creative Destruction Lab. And the advantage of being mentored is that you are surrounded by experienced people who are helping you. And when it comes time to get investment, you can say, I have surrounded myself with experience. Okay. The next one. And so the bottom line question is, can you execute your business plan with the financing that you have requested? You have to give the investor confidence that you will hit your milestones with the financing requested. Okay, and you have to convince yourself that you can hit the milestone. Because if you don't, you're going to lose a huge amount of value in your company. Okay, you will have worked all this time and you turn around and all of a sudden you have what's known as a down round, which means that the value of your company actually fell from the last time you got investment, and nobody wants that. Okay, now we have this hugely busy slide, and I apologize for it, but it's all about risk. Okay, and there's all of these risks that you have to address in your business case. And I have to tell you, when a venture capitalist commissions me to do a due diligence, they are already pretty convinced that you have a market and that you have a value proposition and that you know what you're doing. What they really want me to do is to assess risk. Okay, and these are all of the risks. These aren't all of the risks, but these are the really important risks that you have to address in your business case. Okay, I'm not going to read through them all, but you talked about IP last week. Is your innovation patentable? Do you have freedom to operate? You took freedom to operate, I assume. Okay. Exit risk. So are there exits in your area? And does your device help the big strategic companies sell more of their device? Because strategics do not acquire you for financial reasons. They don't acquire you because you're going to make a profit in 2 years. They're not interested in that. Your profit is lunch money to them. What's important to a strategic is that your product helps them sell more of their product or helps them dominate a market. Okay, so if you have, for example, a new ablation machine, that's going to help them sell more of their ablation catheters. And they sell $1 billion worth of those a year. Okay, so that's the exit risk that you have to look at. Adoption risk, we talked about. Reimbursement risk, how likely is it that you'll get reimbursement? Clinical risk. If you have to do a clinical trial, what's the likelihood that that clinical trial will enroll patients quickly enough? What's the likelihood that that clinical trial will be successful? Personnel risk. What if you lose key people? Okay, hopefully you've surrounded yourself with experience, so there's a lot more in your company than just you. But all these risks that have to be addressed. Okay, so those are the essential elements in your business case. Now let's talk about validation. Yes, ma'am.
If doing this at the early stage,
Yes.
hire someone usually to do this detailed risk analysis, or do you have to do it on your own?
So I always advocate. So the question is, do you do risk analysis on your own or do you hire people to do it? The answer is you do it on your own. Okay. Maybe if you had 3 businesses before this and you're worth $20 million, you can go out and pay somebody to do it. But if this is your first business, you want to have a total grasp of everything related to your business. Okay, you want to understand all the nuances. You don't want somebody coming to you and say, oh, it's too risky, don't do it. Because you won't believe them anyway. Okay, so do it yourself. Okay. So validation. All right, the first thing was the market size and the market growth. Yes. Yeah.
When you're getting protected this value, does it matter what year you put, 5 years, 10 years, or does it depend on, or is there
nobody can really estimate a 5-year risk. You'll get some investors who want, 5-year risk and 5-year financials. I'm really happy if you can do it out a year. Most of them will insist on 3 years. But there's just so far ahead that anybody can see. And that's why no matter what you do, there's always residual risk. Okay, even if you know everything right now. And that's one of the big problems in the medical technology field. You start out and the market's in this place, but you don't get your product on the market for 4 or 5 years and the market has moved. Okay, you try and see that it is a risk. And sometimes you have to say, look, I acknowledge there's a risk. No business case is perfect. All business cases have weaknesses. And sometimes you say, we've done everything we can to mitigate this risk, but there's still residual risk here. And investors are very cool with that. I mean, if everything was a slam dunk, they wouldn't be making the kind of money that they're making. Okay, so how do you evaluate your total addressable market? One easy way is professional market studies. They're expensive. Sometimes they're in the library. Make sure your product is the right fit. I've seen a lot of business cases where the product addresses its tiny little part of this report, but they're quoting the numbers for the whole report. And it's equivalent to pulling numbers out of the air. You can do a bottom up. You can get government statistics for the prevalence of the disease that you're after. Medicare payments for diagnosis and treatment is public knowledge, United States. One of the most important sources that I have found is reading annual reports from public companies. If you're in a market that Medtronic's in, get the Medtronic annual report for the past few years. It's free, it's public, and it contains a wealth of information. And all public companies have to work really hard to get investors. And one of the ways that they work really hard to do it is they publish these annual reports that talk about their markets. Also, these public companies have investment companies that are following them, and they publish reports. So, get on a stock market site and read analyst reports for all the companies in your field, and it'll tell you a great deal about the market, and it's very reliable information. So you're Sam, what part of your market can you realistically capture? Okay, very critical that you do this. I had a company once that was in breast cancer, and we had a disposable that was basically better than mammography. And in the United States, mammography at the time was paying about $120, and this disposable was about $20. So it added $20 to the procedure, but it was better. It was viable. But we looked at Europe, and in Europe, the reimbursement was averaging $40. So we couldn't put in a $20 disposable in that market. That market was not available to us. Okay, we recognized it very early. You have to look at the geography that you can realistically capture. You have to look at the medical techniques that you can reasonably capture within your total available market. Okay, you can research medical guidelines. One sec. You can research medical guidelines. Medical guidelines will tell the physician what they need to do. And if they're being told to do something else, can you realistically capture that market until you have the clinical evidence to be able to get yourself into those guidelines? Okay, yes, question.
For new entrepreneurs, would you recommend them to do their own market research, or is it like better to hire professional companies like EY or McKinsey? Or maybe you have your own company, maybe at a later stage, you hire professional people.
Okay.
Do that, then you do it.
So the question is it better to do your own market research or to hire somebody to do it? And the answer is both. Okay, you need to do your own market research so that you will really understand this market. And when you do your own validation, you're talking to people directly and you have those direct sources. Now, if you're going for a Series A round, and this is a home run product, and you want a very large pre-money valuation, having a professional company do a market study is great. That is external validation. So having external validation gives you a huge leg up on people who have only done it themselves. But if you don't do it yourself and you rely on somebody, it's pretty easy to get fooled, number one. And number two, you don't really understand the market yourself. You haven't talked to all the people that you need to talk to. Okay, and then finally, the SOM. One of the best ways to validate the market that you can really reach now is to talk to salespeople and distributors. Where do you do that? You go to a conference. You walk around the exhibit hall. You talk to salespeople, you talk to the marketing people, and you ask them questions about this market. Now, you have to be careful because you're going to be competing with them potentially, but you can get a huge amount of information. And these are the people who really know the market. Why are they the people who really know the market? Because they're asking people to reach into their wallets and write them a check. So everybody else is, giving you all the rainbows, and they're coming in saying, this is what really happens in this market. Okay. Another CEO that I knew, he did his market evaluation by trying to hire a sales manager. So he'd put out an ad for a sales manager or a VP of sales. They'd come in and he'd say, convince me this is a good market. And again, these were people who really know their stuff, who've been in the hospitals, who talk to the purchasing agents, who write the contracts, and they know their stuff. So if you can do that, and you can, when you go to your investors, you can say, I spoke to these people, this is what they said. You can talk to them, you can get your due diligence people to talk to them. You've got a huge leg up. So this is the value of validation. Okay, you haven't picked numbers out of the air. You've gone to the effort of going to conferences, talking to people, researching the government statistics, doing all this stuff. And I think you can see this is going to give you a much stronger business case. Yeah.
You go to sales professional over the end user.
Okay. The question is, why would you go to sales professionals over the end user? There's a couple of reasons. First of all, doctors are very opinionated people. They have every right to be. They don't often agree with each other. Okay. In fact, they often violently disagree with each other. One doctor says, I love this product, I'm going to use it. The other one says, I don't need it at all. The second reason is that doctors have a very unrealistic view of what it takes for them to buy a product. Most doctors say, I'm the lead doctor here. I get anything I want. The truth of the matter is they don't. The truth of the matter is every product going into a US hospital these days has to go through a value analysis committee. And they are brutal. And the product has to make the hospital money or the doctor doesn't get it, pure and simple. So, if you're selling to a doctor for their private practice, sure, go to the end user because they're the ones who make the decisions. But the salespeople talk to the decision makers, the real decision makers. And getting the doctor to say, I want it, is only the first step. Okay. Market potential. We talked about licensing model. There's other models, direct sales models, distribution models. You need to validate your business model. As I said before, every business model has its place. Every business model can be successful, but they have to be validated. If it's direct sales, are there salespeople available? And direct sales is the most expensive business model. Do you have enough gross margin to support your salespeople? You need to do some bottom-up analysis. How many customers will the salesperson get to see a month? How many sales does the salesperson have to sell a month in order to pay their commissions and salary and make money for the company? Does it work? Maybe you'll decide on a distribution model. First question is, are there distributors in your field? My company was in cardiac electrophysiology. There were no distributors in the United States. All the big companies sold direct, so there were not enough products for distributors, and there weren't any. There were distributors in Europe, there were distributors in other countries, but not in the United States. We had to know that right from the beginning. Licensing model, I've already talked about. Is it a right fit? Okay, and finally, market adoption. As I said, doctors disagree with each other. If you were going to assess market adoption, you have to talk to multiple key opinion leaders. Okay, and if you're coming out of a hospital, make sure they're not your friends. I made that mistake when I worked at the Wellesley. I started my first business, went back there, took 8 doctors to the cafeteria, bought them all coffee, pitched my product, and they all said, great, this is wonderful. But they were all my friends. And in the end, not one of them bought one. So multiple KOLs, where do you find multiple KOLs? Look in the research journals, go to conferences. I've been to conferences where, I listened to one of the doctors give a lecture, approached him afterwards, said, we've started a company that's doing this and this. Would you like to help us out? And they want to, because key opinion leaders want to stay key opinion leaders. They want to be associated with the newest technologies. They want to be associated with bringing new things into the profession. And so if they think that they can get, hit to their reputation by working with you, they will. Not that you don't have to compensate them for it, of course, but they will. So find key opinion leaders, extraordinarily important. And if you find 3, you're going to get 2 who agree and 1 who doesn't. You've got to keep going, get enough people that you get general agreement. Okay, how else do you validate market adoption? We talked about interviewing sales professionals and distributors. As I said, they really know their market. They'll know if there's a market for your device. Now, you have to be careful. If you haven't filed your IP yet, you cannot do a public disclosure. But if you have filed IP, talk to them. Sometimes they'll get so excited, they'll quit their job and come work for you. Okay, it has happened to me. Interview purchasing agents. If you're talking to key opinion leaders, especially in the United States, ask them, can you get me an interview with your purchasing agent? Because the purchasing agent will tell you what the chances are of passing through the value analysis committee. Okay, and finally, find market adoption curves from comparable companies, especially if these companies are public, because it's all in their annual report. How quickly did they get adopted by the market? You're not going to get adopted any more quickly. If you're lucky, you'll match that curve, but you can show that curve to investors and say, my financials are based on the curve from this other company. That makes sense, and it's external validation. Okay, when do you stop? You don't stop until the results become consistent. Okay, you'll know. There's no hard and fast answer, but you'll know when everybody starts to agree. You're going to get some outliers all the time, but when the vast majority agrees, you can stop. You have enough. Okay, but don't stop until that point. Okay, Let's move on to financial and financing return. Okay. Again, go to comparable companies. There are public companies, it's easy. Private companies, there are websites that report venture capital financing. Those websites are expensive, but if you're talking to investors, ask them for their help. They will help you. The time to approach investors is not when you need money. The time to approach investors is before you need money. Get them to follow you, get them to know you, and then you can ask for their help. I need to research comparable companies, how much they raised at which stage. I know you have a license for this website. Can you help me with it? You have to provide 3-year financial projections, but you have to validate each and every number in those projections, because the investor is going to ask you, okay, you've got 1.5 million for product development. Where did that number come from? Okay, so where does it come from? If you're going to outsource product development, get a quotation. If you're going to do it yourself, how many people will you need? How long is it going to take? Talk to them. As often as possible, do a bottom-up analysis. How much are clinical trials going to cost? Find out how much similar clinical trials cost from comparable companies. Talk to some hospitals about what they will charge you. Talk to lawyers, talk to IP lawyers, talk to insurance companies, talk to everybody so that when you're pinned down on a number, you can say, I looked into that. Okay, and then finally validate your business model in terms of what is being outsourced and what is being kept internal. You have to keep what's known as your core competency internal. If you're a software company, you can't outsource all your software and expect that you're going to do that forever. Okay, you have to develop your own capability, but there's lots of stuff that you should outsource. So again, find out if there are companies available, how busy they are, what they're going to charge you, validate all that stuff. Okay, ability to execute. As I said before, if you do not have the management experience, surround yourself with people who do. And that's not only potential employees and advisors, but it's even suppliers. Suppliers are a fantastic source of validation. You go to a supplier with a drawing for a product, and the supplier will say to you, if we do it this way and this way and this way, it's going to cost you this much. Your tooling is going to cost you that much. You're getting it from a supplier. So you get that in writing and you put that in your business case, and the investor is going to look and say, they did their homework. I can believe this. It's not just somebody talking. If you need a clinical trial, find yourself a principal investigator. Find a principal investigator who does clinical trials, who's done it before, who's able to recruit, and who's able to publish. The choice of your PI is critical. Okay, the cost of your clinical trial is very important, but what's even more important is the ability to recruit. If you have a clinical trial and you forecasted recruiting 20 patients a month, and you wind up recruiting 2 patients a month, the investor is going to look at you and say, well, maybe there's no market for this product. If you can't even recruit for a clinical trial, do people really need it? So you go for your next round of financing and it isn't there. Your PI has to be able to, when you do a clinical trial, you are competing against 20 other clinical trials being done in the same hospital. Sometimes 2 or 3 being done by the same PI. You have to ensure that this is going to get recruited. You have to ensure that this PI wants to publish. And that has to be part of your business case. If you can't find a PI to do that, maybe it's not worth doing. Where do you find a PI? Again, research papers. Every research paper that's published has the email address of the author. Write to them. Go to conferences. Talk to them directly. You know, Dr. Smith, I love your work. We have this idea for a product. It's going to be great for your patients. Should be publishable. Are you interested? Let's talk about it. Compare the tasks in your plan with the people you've recruited. Make sure that you have somebody to handle each aspect of your business. Okay? Do not pay people to learn, especially if you are inexperienced yourself. It's expensive, but you will get the financing you need to hire these people. If you try and nickel and dime it, it won't be there. Engage quality regulatory and reimbursement consultants. You can normally go to any consultant, any lawyer, and have an interview for free. Okay, and just talk to them about what would be involved in making this business go forward. And they'll tell you. You know, you go to an IP lawyer, they'll say, well, a provisional patent right now is running around $15,000 to $20,000, and utility patent is this, and national phase is that. And in my experience, if you want to get to Series A, you're going to have to write 3 patents, et cetera, et cetera. Talk to these people. Okay. As I said before, okay. Question, when should you engage with regulatory and quality? The answer is when you're writing your business case. Okay. You need to know, it's one of the most important aspects. Your regulatory plan has to be rock solid. I'm going to talk about that under risks, but basically what it comes down to is your regulatory plan very often determines the viability of your business. Is this a class 1, class 2, or class 3 product in the United States? The difference is like 5 or 6 times the amount of money that you have to raise for each class that you go up. And the amount of time it takes to get to market goes up by 5 or 6 times as well. So it's absolutely critical to know that. How do you validate your regulatory status? Well, the first thing you do is you talk to a regulatory consultant. You know, what's your opinion? And as I said, most consultants will give you half an hour of their time for free. The major way of validating your regulatory status is to do what's called a pre-submission meeting, or a pre-sub. The FDA will meet with you. Health Canada will meet with you. The European notified bodies will meet with you. And you can, with the FDA, for example, you present a plan saying, we believe this is class 2. We believe it won't need a clinical trial. This is our predicate. Do you agree? And the FDA will say, yes, we agree. And they'll say it in writing. Okay, it's not binding, but they'll still say it in writing. And that gives, you can imagine as an investor, the comfort that that gives you, that you've been to FDA, that you have talked to them about this, that they're not fighting you on it. And same with Health Canada and same with Europe. Okay. And if you meet with a European notified body, they'll also tell you what it's going to cost to get there. And most regulatory consultants will tell you. The other thing is quality. Do you need a quality system? Most of the time you do. If you're going to get a quality system, how are you going to get it? You can use a quality consultant. There are some companies that provide the software for quality systems that you can engage with directly. Talk to them. Okay, so when you put in your budget, I've allocated $100,000 to get us a quality system and it's going to take 9 months. You can back that up. You can say, I talked to this regulatory consultant, or I talked to this software company, and they've all told me that if we work at this diligently, we can do it in 9 months. And they've told me this is what it's going to cost. Okay. When you are asking for money, one of the really, really important things is to ask for enough money. Okay. You don't want to ask for a lot of money, because the more money you ask for, the more of your company you're giving away. But if you don't ask for enough money, things do not go well. So what a lot of companies do is they say, okay, I need $1 million to make this milestone, FDA approval or prototype or whatever. And they make it. They spend their $1 million and they hit the milestone. But then when they go out for investment, they have $1 left in the bank, payroll's due next week, and the investors look at them and say, well, you did a great job, but I'm going to offer you a really low pre-money value for your next round. Why is that? Because you have no money in the bank. You're desperate. And even if you have a little money in the bank, they will just wait you out. They will just wait until you run out of money. And as I said, they're sharks, but this is how they make their money. How do you counter that? You raise enough money that you can make your milestone, and you have enough left over for contingency in case anything goes wrong. And you have enough left over that you have another 9 months worth of financing to give you that time to raise your next round without somebody trying to wait you out. Okay, how do you validate risks? These are all pretty straightforward. Okay, you just have to do it. It's a huge amount of work. Huge amount of work. Scientific risk is pretty easy. You talk to the experts, you read papers, and sometimes you have to do some experiments. Technical risk is very tricky. If you are developing a product that is really cutting edge technology, that means that the technical risk is very high, and you've got to do something about it. Sometimes it's making a prototype, generally doing a demonstration of proof of concept. Okay. People have to believe that this technology is going to work, because a lot of times it doesn't. A lot of times there's a kind of leap of faith. Well, we developed this, sort of breadboard prototype, and it sort of works. We know we have to improve it by an order of magnitude, and we think we can. That's not good enough. Regulatory risk. How do you mitigate that? You have a pre-submission meeting. That's the best way to do it. Financial risk. Come up with 3 different projections: optimistic, realistic, and pessimistic. Do a sensitivity analysis. What if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? Manufacturing risk. There are some devices that are impossible to manufacture. You can make one by hand, maybe, but trying to make it consistently with high quality over and over again sometimes is very difficult. Sometimes it's easy. How do you know? Go to a manufacturer. Go to an outsourced manufacturer. Talk to them. Clinical risk. If you can run a small safety trial before going for a Series A, gives you a huge leg up. Reimbursement risk, you talk to the agents. IP risk, you consult with your patent attorney. In general, you're not going to have enough money to do a full freedom to operate analysis. Those cost like $60,000 or $70,000 to do. A lot of it you can do yourself. A lot of it can be outsourced. There are a lot of companies in India, for example, that will do freedom to operate searches very, very inexpensively compared to North American anyway. But that's one of the big things. Patents do not protect you as a small company. Because if somebody infringes your patent, you can't call the police. You have to take them to court. And the average patent infringement suit costs about $3 million in legal fees. So as a small business, it doesn't protect you at all. But the big companies, what they're really looking for when they want to acquire you is patents. That's really what they're buying. They're buying those patents because they can afford to defend them. And to them, that's where your value is. So you have to do patents, but you have to have freedom to operate, and your device has to be patentable. And let me tell you, it does not matter whether you think your device is patentable or not. I have like 30 patents. I won't even guess whether something is patentable because patent law is so archaic and so convoluted. You've got to be a patent attorney to know whether something's patentable. So get that advice. Adoption risk. If you can get customers that say, when this comes out, I'm willing to pay for it, and if they're willing to put it in writing and you can quote them, that's gold. And finally, exit risk. If, you know, most of the experienced CEOs, as soon as they start a company, will start talking to the strategics right away before they've done anything. Is this something you would eventually be interested in? Now, again, be careful not to do a public disclosure. You have to file your IP first. But start talking to the strategics, have them start following you, have them tell you what they're interested in, because they will. They'll say, you know, we're not interested in that aspect, but if your product could do this, we'd love it. And they will also tell you what they're not interested in. I was involved in a company in Cleveland, and they had mapping software that could tell you whether your pacemaker was going to be effective in controlling heart failure. And we talked to the strategics, and they said, we don't want that. We're not interested at all. Well, why not? Well, because right now, 30% of this particular type of pacemaker is ineffective at controlling heart failure. And if we get your device and it tells us which patients will be effective, we're losing 30% of our sales. Now, that might sound cynical, but that really happened. So talking to the strategics and making sure that they are interested in what you're doing is great, because then when you go for investment and the venture capitalist says, all right, we're doing due diligence now, you can say, why don't you talk to this guy at Boston Scientific? We've talked to him already. Okay. Final thing, we're right on time, it's good. I'm always asked, how strong does the business case really have to be? As I said, every business case has weaknesses. And as when you're just starting out, there's just so much you can do. So here is kind of a basic summary, okay? The graph starts at strong. A business case that's not strong is useless. That's the minimum, okay? And it goes from strong up to bulletproof, okay? If you're doing a pre-seed round, you need a strong business case, not a bulletproof business case. So pre-seed round means you're generally raising less than $2 million. But if your business is raising more than $20 million, you need to be at the commercial stage. You need to be selling product. Okay, why? Because that strengthens your business case. That reduces the risk of adoption. It reduces the risk of sales channels. It reduces all those risks. IP, if you're at the pre-seed stage, if you have submitted a provisional patent, you're a step ahead. Yes.
Well, I haven't talked about it's just competitive risk.
Right. Okay.
That's something you're-
Yeah. So competitive risk is one of the risks. Everybody says there's absolutely no competition. Everybody says that, right? There's always competition. Okay. If you have something and there's nothing like it in the market, your competitor is do nothing. Your competitor is the doctor can just continue to do what they're doing now. So you always have competition and you have to address it. And it's not just what your competitors have on the market today. It's number one, how they're going to react to you. And number two, what they're going to do tomorrow. How do you know what they're going to do tomorrow? The answer is look at published patents. Patents are published before they're issued. So you submit a provisional patent is not published, but a utility patent is published like 6 months after it's submitted, a year or two before it's actually issued. So there's all these, everything that a big company is working on, they're not going to put a lot of money into that project if they can't patent it. So you're not right up to date of what they're doing, but you can see what they were doing, what they started 6 or 8 months ago. So you can get some idea as to what they're working on. Secondly, if you can talk to some marketing people in those companies and, present a hypothetical to them, what if, how do you know something like this is not going to come along? They'd say, well, if they did, we'd undercut them. We'd lower our price like crazy to get them out of the market. That's a typical reaction. So yes, you can't, assessing the risk of competition is generally one of the weak areas of most business cases because it's really hard to find out. You don't know what they're thinking, but certainly find out if they've published if any of their patents have been published recently. Look at every one of these big companies has key opinion leaders in their advisory board. So research the key opinion leaders, find out what they've published lately. What they're working on is likely to be going to those companies. Okay, basically do as much as you can do. Yeah.
Certain analysis or frameworks that you can suggest when coming up with a strategy for market entry when it comes to developing a business view.
So the question is, are there strategies that we can do to develop our business case?
Gap analysis, like which type of analysis or frameworks can you suggest that are generally quite useful when developing a business?
So one of the things I've done, what we're going to do in the workshop, is I've printed out the elements of the business case that I've talked about most. And we're going to do some analysis for business cases that are being developed here. What is strong and what is weak? So you can use this sheet, but unfortunately, every business is very different. And, if you go through the slides that I've presented and you follow each one of them, in terms of format, the format's not all that important. Okay, when you go to a professional investor, they're looking for substance. Okay, they're not looking for style. And so if you address each one of these factors, you'll be okay. Okay. Other things between a strong and a bulletproof business case, management. If you're pre-seed and you're surrounded by experience, that'll do. If you are looking for the big bucks, your CEO better be a serial entrepreneur who's had multiple exits. Okay, and that tells you something. The likelihood is, as your company grows, you as the founder will not be CEO forever. At some point, the investors will come along and say, look, I'll invest your $20 million, but I want to bring in a CEO who has done well for me in the past. Okay? It happens, prepare for it. It's kind of a fact of life. I was on the advisory board for a venture capitalist called Vengrowth a while ago, and they had 17 investments over 5 years, and they eventually replaced 16 of the CEOs. So it happens. It doesn't mean it's not worth doing, because you get to the point where you've brought your company from nothing to the point of being commercial. You've done really well. You've retained a fairly large ownership in that company. Somebody takes it over, and you go back to the starting line, start something new, but this time you're a serial entrepreneur. You've done it before. You had an exit, or you had a company that went to Series A and Series B, and the investors are going to look at you in a different light. Regulatory risk. If you're pre-seed, having a clear predicate and a pre-submission meeting that gives you basically the go-ahead is fine. If you have to have a bulletproof business case, you better have FDA or Health Canada clearance. Other risk factors, they have to be all identified. They have to all be validated, even at the pre-seed stage. At the bulletproof stage, they have to be fully mitigated. What that means is you not only know what they are, but you've taken steps to make sure that you have reduced those risks as far as possible. And finally, market adoption. If you're pre-seed, you need to have a confirmed intention to buy. Okay, you've talked to purchasing agents, you've talked to end users. They want this. If it's a commercial stage, you have to have a strong sales ramp. That means sales are increasing. Okay. Now, we're done here. It's 5 to 6. We're going to have a 15-minute break, and then we're going to do this workshop. And what's going to happen in the workshop, we're going to divide into groups. We're going to talk about parts of your individual business cases that are weak. And then the whole group is going to brainstorm how to help you to handle that, how to handle that situation. We're not going to deal with any confidential material, okay? But when you consider your own business cases, you're probably going to come up with areas that are weak that you don't know how to validate or you don't know how to approach, and we're all going to help each other do it. And I will start off by presenting a couple of companies that I've worked with and my assessment of what their business case was before they got their investment. Okay, so break time.